Welcome to the VMJPod Graduate Recruitment Series, where we dive into the latest trends and innovations in early career hiring, featuring insights from industry top experts driving the future of talent acquisition.
Oh, welcome to VMJPod, where we discuss the latest in grad recruitment, speaking with leaders throughout Australia. And today we have Natalie, and I'm joined here by
Steve from GHD. And I guess full disclosure, Nat and I have known each other for I don't want to know how long now, but
too many years.
Steve.
Steve.
But it's that hopefully then means that we're going to have a really, really good chat.
I hope so. And thanks for having me, guys. Very excited to be here today.
Yeah, we've got a terrific theme where we're going to really unpack how you've been able to get a seat at the table by building trust with your direct report. But before we do jump into it, for those who don't know Natalie, do you mind if you introduce yourself?
Of course. So hi, everyone. My name is Natalie, or Nat, as I like to go by, and I am the grad manager at Westpac. I have been working at Westpac now for nearly 7 years, always in the grad space. So definitely an OG or a veteran like Steve, and have been managing the program now for the last 4 years. So as you know, everyone in early careers knows, a grad manager essentially runs the show when it comes to all elements of the grad program. So just a bit about our grad program. It is a national program. So we run roughly about 18 different programs nationally, and we cover all aspects of the grad cycle. So it's not just the recruitment aspect, it's the brand, the attraction, the onboarding, the learning and development, and everything in between. So yeah, definitely have all bases covered when it comes to grad in our space.
Well, I suppose you do need to, given that you do have a seat at the table. You do need to take the responsibility of all those facets of grad recruitment. Just before we jump into it as well, do you mind if you just share the numbers of recruitment, grads that are joining your program?
Yeah, so typically year on year numbers can change, but if I talk about our 2025 cohort, so we brought in just under 140 grads this year, and yeah, numbers have been roughly around that for the last couple of years since COVID.
Yeah, and I guess from an applications perspective, Nat, what do you start with to get down to that 140 or so?
Yeah, I mean, we do receive a high number of applications year on year. If I look back to kind of last year's campaign, I'd say collectively across both of our intakes that we recruit for, we're looking at upwards of about 7,000 applications. So yeah, it's a busy one. But you know, that's great to see that so many students look to want to apply to us, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely a good place to start. And you know, look, there's a fabulous brand that sits behind there as well. And, you know, look, maybe to kind of kickstart the conversation now, I know Dave's really talked about getting a seat at the table and, you know, how do you make sure that you can then influence, knowing that you picked up the program after having worked in it for about 3 years, you know, how did you find, or how did you manage that transition personally to kind of go from, you know, fantastic collaborator to now needing to run and lead, and then maybe, you know, take us through a little bit of that personal journey as well?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Steve, because, you know, I joined Westpac, as I say, 7 years ago, and I'd been in sort of external agency recruitment before. So had a vague idea of, you know, recruitment per se, but then coming internally and into a bank, it was a huge shock. Very much, deer in headlights it was at the beginning. But I think my foundation as a kind of grad consultant before taking on that manager role was really important, because I was able to get my head around, you know, how we did things at the bank, and, you know, the small intricacies of running a grad program, which is very different to anything else. I was very fortunate to have an amazing leader. My previous leader, she was a veteran in the grad space as well, and yeah, to this day I put everything down to her, that she taught me everything I know. So after 3 years, you know, it was kind of a natural transition that as she went off to her next opportunity, I was going to step up. Initially it was for 12 months. So I guess with that, massive imposter syndrome, I'll be honest, from day one, because you never think you're good enough. You always look at your leader and you're inspired by them and you think, gosh, this is the pinnacle. So there definitely was a lot of nerves and anxiety and to kind of take that seat, albeit for 12 months. But I think as well, for me as well, like, I'm a perfectionist and I really wanted to do a good job. I didn't want to disappoint her. I didn't want to let her down. So I think I had a lot of personal pressure on myself, probably more so than anything else. That's what I was bothered about. But yeah, as I mentioned before, I think stepping into then that manager seat after 3 years, yes, I had a good foundation, but I don't think anything then prepares you that you're in the driver's seat and you're the one who's making the call. So I think that was something I had to get comfortable with straight away, is that I'm calling the shots. And yes, you've got great teams around you and support networks and whatnot, but everybody is looking to you to make that call. And I would say after now 4 years in role, that definitely comes a lot easier. I have a lot more trust in myself. I have a lot more, knowledge and, the backing to be able to make calls quite easily. But I think for anyone starting out in sort of a managerial role who's maybe transitioning or is covering for someone or whatever it is, it's okay to feel that way. It's not a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on your capability. It's natural. I think it's natural for anyone stepping in, right? You are always going to question, like, oh, am I going to do a good job? Is anyone going to listen to me? Is anyone going to kind of take me seriously? I definitely felt those things. And I think, oh, gosh, if I'm honest, it probably took me a good 9 months to even just sort of get comfortable with, oh gosh, yeah, they're asking me to sign this off, or they're asking me what I think. Oh, I don't know. But I think something that I realized straight away is that, yes, you have all these feelings of, the imposter syndrome and not sure that you're going to do a good job, but you have to balance that with, well, listen, I am the one in this seat now. If I don't take myself seriously, if I don't know my stuff, if I'm not the one advocating for this program, there's nobody else to do that. So you learn very quickly that you have to balance your nerves and, your anxiety with that sense if you've got to back yourself. And I think, to be honest, that's been my mantra throughout the time I've been manager, is you've got to back yourself, because actually you're the only one who knows your space.
Yep. You've got to back yourself.
Sorry, I'm rambling.
That. No, not at all. Not at all. You've got to back yourself. And imposter syndrome. Who hasn't felt that at times when you take on new responsibility within an organization? I suppose as early days, and you sort of mentioned the first 9 months, sort of, there's a ramp up for you to really, I suppose, feel comfortable. With as the leader of the grad space and calling all the shots, and you really need to have that long-term vision and balance that out with short-term wins or impacts. How are you able to do that and also bring your executive sponsor along for the journey? What is the secret sauce there?
I mean, if I knew that, I'd be selling it by the bottle. But I think
you're clearly doing something right.
Well, I don't know. I hope so. I think for me initially, you mentioned kind of short-term goals, wins versus the long-term strategy. And I think, for anyone who works in early careers, we can probably all agree that we work on a cyclical basis, right? So we know what's coming. We know that this is going to be chaos season. We're campaigning, we're, going out on the road, or we're recruiting, or we're onboarding, whatever it is. So we're quite lucky in that sense that you can really plan out the calendar year and see where your peaks and troughs are going to be. So I think from that, to start with that, to be like, okay, I know that in the next quarter, we've got to achieve X, Y, Z, right? Let's focus on that. And then I think as you get more comfortable and once you're in that cycle, and I think again, for anyone who's transitioning into a managerial role who hasn't been in the grad space before, learn your cycle, speak to your teams, like what do you do in a year? Really map it out so you can visually see when your busy periods are going to be versus where you've got some, I'll call it downtime, but some time to really be strategic and plan things out long term. So I think once you're comfortable with your cycle and you kind of know what's going on and you know what you're aiming for long term, that's when then I think I was able to really kind of then sit and think long term. right, okay, what's my strategy for the next financial year going to be? What did we achieve this year? What did we do well? Where did we maybe fall down, or where did we really find some challenges, and think, okay, how am I going to then overcome them for the next financial year? And then as I've got more comfortable, I think over the years, I think then it's a case of, right, once I'm comfortable in my space and I get it and I understand what my own personal goals are, how am I then linking my strategic vision for the grad program in with in my case, the bank's overall strategic vision? Because I think that's then the next step of the secret sauce, is you then need to plug into your organization's strategy. Because I think then once you get that, or you're on the way to doing that, that's again another area where you can get a seat at the table, because the execs are going to listen and be like, do you know what? Okay, yes, we now understand the grad program because it's plugging in with our vision of being whatever, you know? And I think that's probably something that's missing sometimes, because in grad and early careers, we are all in our own bubbles a lot of the time. You know, and we can sometimes forget that we are part of a wider organization who has an ethos, a purpose and values. And we need to really make sure that what we're doing is plugged in and actually really highlighted to be on the same pages as those values of the company. So I think, yeah, for me, that was something that I hadn't initially thought of as a manager stepping into the space. It was just, you know, I need to look after everything. I just need to kind of nurture it in this space. But actually then for me, it was a case of, well, no, we need to go bigger and we need to plug into the bank's actual strategic vision, because I need to be seen as a function rather than just a service.
And there's a really being able to articulate not only the grad strategy, but then linking into your enterprise or your business strategy can actually be really, really challenging, in part because sometimes that overarching strategy, or the people that hold the cards with that, they can be really, really hard to tap into sometimes. So, you know, knowing that you've gone on this journey, this is the extra sizzle that's coming with the Nat secret sauce of grad recruitment. How did you, I guess, first part, how did you get that foot in? How did you start to work that influence? But then almost more critically, how did you stay in that position of influence over the last 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, it's hard, Stephen. I'm sure you can probably talk to this as well. I think it's about, so many things. First of all, for me, it was, as I mentioned, you know, learn your own space, be comfortable with your own space. And I think for me, really early on, I put pressure on myself to be the biggest advocate of my space, but the biggest knowledge article of my space. So for me, anytime if I were to receive a call or a message of, you know, anyone in the business, whether it be execs or not, how many grads do you have? How many applications did we have last year? What's our female to male, you know, ratio? I would have those stats on point, because that is building credibility with the business. If you're telling someone, oh, actually, do you know what? I don't know. Let me go away and find out for you. You're not helping that person. So for me, I wanted to be that one-stop shop of, if someone comes to me for a stat or whatever, however small, I need to be that person who they're like, do you know what? Nat knows their stuff. Like, I went to her yesterday and she gave me this pack, or she gave me this stats like within X amount of time. That's how you start to build credibility and trust, I think, with, you know, whether it be execs or other teams or whatever it is. So for me, that was a piece of advice that I gave to myself, and I've kept from day one. It's be the biggest advocate of your spot and know your stats. Because let's face it, everybody loves data. Everybody loves insights. They want to know what you're doing, what anyone else is doing. So I think, you know, to build networks externally and internally is also the next point that I want to cover, which is crucial, I think, to gaining seats at the table and building trust and credibility with execs. Because yes, you need to know your own space, but you need to know what everyone else is doing. And that's why for me, you know, building external networks has been a real important part for me over the last, you know, 4 years. Networking with other grad managers, being part of industry groups, you know, liaising with your suppliers, questioning your suppliers to get stats and trends, you know, to build your knowledge network. So I think for me, that external network is really important to build credibility with leaders, but also then taking it to the next level. Internal networks is super important, I've found, especially in a big, you know, organization like ours. You know, for me, with the execs, you know, you can't just knock on an exec door and be like, hi, it's me. Can I please present to you all about the grad program. As much as I'd love to do that, there's certain, things that you can and can't do. So for me, I thought, right, okay, do you know what? My end goal is for, the general exec of whichever division to understand their grad program and to formally endorse it. Okay, how am I going to go about that? So for me, it's about building networks, right? And we know that doesn't happen overnight. So I knew at the beginning, like, I can't just go to so-and-so's business manager or so-and-so's heads of HR and be like, hi, can you please endorse this program? You have to build trust and you have to build credibility. That doesn't happen overnight. And I think that's something I want to reiterate to everyone. It's that, we all need something now. We all know that we need things now and we need to get this over the line tomorrow. But with longevity to success and longevity to doing, to getting this endorsement and credibility, you're going to have to work at it. And unfortunately, if you're not prepared to do that, then you're not going to get the results that you want long term. So for me, I think it was really about just getting to understand which of the business areas that I needed to go in and influence and who it was that I needed to speak to. And through that, I actually learned that you have to be able to pivot in terms of your communication style. Obviously, I'm a bit of a talker, as you can probably understand, but not everyone has time for a phone call, especially our execs, right? So, you have to learn, okay, so-and-so's business manager actually just loves email. They love Teams, whatever it is. So learn how to adapt your communication style to be able to actually, speak to these people, and learn how they want to be communicated with and what do they want to receive from you. Is it a pack? Is it, a summary in an email? Is it whatever it is? Because, one size fits all doesn't work here. So, you have to again be, up on your Excel skills, up on your PowerPoint skills, however it is they want to receive information, be prepared to do that, and be able to pivot. I think that was something that I learned early on, is that, you can't just assume that by communicating in the same way to everyone is going to get the same result.
Some great advice here. Like,
well, I could see you vibing.
No, I just really wanted to get in.
I'm in for that. I'm in for that. I'm in for that.
Well, why don't I just quickly summarize what I heard? So we heard aligning to probably the mission and the vision of the business. And we also heard about being organized, knowing your stats. And then networking, thirdly, not badgering them, but bringing them along for the journey and slipping into their way of work through communication. You did touch on advocacy, and I'd like to unpack that a little bit as well, because I'm assuming part of the secret sauce is getting other people within the business to say wonderful things about the program. So how are you encouraging advocacy at Westpac?
Yeah, I mean, again, very different for everyone, right? Very challenging probably for a lot of us who sit in large organizations where, the grad program or the early career space maybe falls under talent acquisition or recruitment or wherever it might be. And, in the hierarchy of things, it's probably a very small team in the midst of a huge company. So how do you kind of make, your space the biggest and brightest, right? It's hard. But I think for me, just kind of, again, going back to what I just touched on briefly, the internal networking is crucial. You've got to be able to know the right people in order to get your program where it needs to be. But I think also, for me in Westpac, our program sits within talent acquisition. So for me, it was like, well, I need the head of talent acquisition to be in my corner. They need to be my advocate. They need to be my mentor. They need to be, pushing our program at any given opportunity. And I'm really thankful that over the years, the managers that I've worked with have always been the biggest supporter of the grad space. And I guess, in saying that, it's about keeping them on the journey as well. A lot of us.
Can I just interrupt you there for a second? Because you've got a unique environment, don't you, with your talent acquisition setup? It's an RPO. Yeah. So how are you managing that RPO relationship? Because you are independent, you're in-house, they're external.
Yes.
You've got them in your corner, maybe in your pocket. I'm curious to know how that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, the RPO came in kind of, say halfway through my tenure so far. So it's definitely been, a transition to be able to liaise with the RPO as opposed to, internal teams. And to your point, you're right. We are kind of a unique setup at Westpac where, the grad team are in-house. We do all of our own recruitment. Having said that, it's super important to have our RPO team on board with the grad space. They need to be educated in terms of what we do. They need to understand that, this is our space and how we transition and how we cross over. So again, for me, as soon as the RPO came into place through my talent acquisition manager, it was right. We need to get in front of the right people here and explain what we do, because yes, it's a unique space. They don't look after grad recruitment. Some other organizations, they may have RPOs looking after the grad recruitment, and the manager may liaise with them on a daily basis. We're quite unique in that respect. So it was for me from the get-go, right? We need to kind of establish, guys, that, this is what we do. You need to understand that this is our process, but also we need to not be independent of each other, because it doesn't work like that. Of course, you're going to come into contact with grads and grad alumni along the way, and vice versa. We're going to need your support being the RPO at Westpac. So it's definitely just been open lines of communication. It's definitely just been, regular communication, sharing insights with them, sharing our stats with them, sharing insights, because they need to understand that the grad space is unique to other recruitment spots. And I think, again, for any managers coming in, we probably all understand by now that grad recruitment is very different to kind of standard recruitment that happens in organizations. So it's being able to just kind of take out those intricacies and understand that, okay, grad tends to be really high volume, it's high paced, it's, very kind of probably different to standard recruitment that happens, throughout the year.
This episode is brought to you by Video My Job, your go-to platform for creating branded employee videos at scale with zero editing. Authentic employee stories are the key to showcasing your culture and attracting top talent. Book a demo on our website and learn how to create hundreds of videos in under 60 days with full support from start to finish.
So Nat, I didn't actually realize that RPO setup as well. So there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff that might pop out of there. But I know when we were talking a little bit earlier, we looked at that difference of influencing up, but then also like Dara and others had done for you as well, right? Like bringing your own team through on the journey as well.
Yes.
As I guess as someone who's gone through that transition, who's gone from consultant to program manager, who's influencing the exec. What are some of the lessons or some of the ways that you're working with your team to help them build that capacity so that it's not just you who has to get out there and fight every single fight?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, when I stepped into the manager role, 4 years ago, it was hard. I'll be honest. It was really hard at the time because, we at Westpac, we have the manager role and then a couple of consultants that has, changed over the years, but it's always been the case that there's been, at least 2 consultants. So I was used to being, a peer to the other consultant. And then, the next day I was their manager. So that was very hard to get used to initially because, it's a whole, I shouldn't be telling them what to do because we've always been, peers rather than now I'm having to call the shots and say, can you do this for me? And can you look into this? So it definitely was a hard line to cross at the beginning. And again, the imposter syndrome comes in like, oh, I'm sorry to have to tell you to do this, but can you do it? But again, going back to that whole point of no, you need to back yourself. You're now in this spot for a reason. You've got to lead. But I think for me, it was just being really open and honest from the get-go to be like, right, this is where we're at now. And, we both understand that this is the vision of what we need to get done over the next couple of months. And yes, we're going to have, some crossovers in projects. And yes, there's going to be times where I'll ask you to do something. But I think for, advice to any managers stepping into the role and thinking, there may be some anxiety around managing a team or a person, I think it's open and honest communication from the get-go. I think if you kind of step in and don't address that, yes, I'm going to have to tell you to do things, or, there's going to be times it might just be a bit tricky along the way. I don't know. Everyone's different in the managerial style, but I think everybody can tell from me is that I'm very open. I'm very honest. I'm an open book when it comes to things. And I personally found that was the best way to deal with that. And then, over the years, as we've, there's been a few change in hands in terms of some of the consultants that have been in our team. We've had, contractors come in, over the years to help with busy periods. So yeah, it's definitely been, managing my style in terms of how I, communicate with staff. But I think, again, just going back to that foundation of being open and honest, guys, we're here to do a job. This is what we're going to achieve, and this is how we're going to get there. And then I think for me, something that I learned from my previous manager, it's that the regular communications and the one-on-ones are gold. Like, I know everyone's busy and it's like, oh, we'll just push this meeting or we'll do it tomorrow. No, like for me, and my team can attest to this, it's like one-on-ones are non-negotiable. Unless someone is off sick or there's some chaos that's happening, one-on-ones are crucial, because if we don't sit down and have that time together every week to understand what's going on, what do you need help with, what can I help you with, then that's not a team for me. And to your point, Steve, before, our program, it is reputable and we've won awards, and I'm so proud of everything that we've achieved, but I will never kind of sit back and be like, I've done this. For me, in any capacity, and again, my team can attest to this, it's we have done this, because yes, I'm leading the ship, but I have a team behind me who are doing the work just as much as I am. So again, advice for me to managers is that you have to celebrate your team. You have to literally be inclusive with the team, because if you haven't got a good team behind you who don't trust you, who don't have faith in you, who don't want to work for you, then it goes on without saying, right, how the success of the program is going to go.
So how do you get that team to take on some of your leadership burden, I guess? One of the themes obviously that we were unpacking here with you earlier was your ability to leverage the senior executives to get the program buy-in, to do the things that you need to do. How are you imparting that skill to your team so that it then doesn't sit all on your shoulders?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things that we could talk about here. I think, again, if I look back to when I first started, and I mentioned I'm a perfectionist, right? So I was like, oh, well, I'll just do everything, because I don't want to burden anyone else. Like, I'll do it because then, I know it's kind of done in my way, and then it will be fine. But then, as many managers can probably relate, is that if you try and do all of that, plus your advocacy, plus all of your other stuff, well, you're never not working, right? And that's just not a good space to get into. So I think the art of delegation is key, and it's learning to be comfortable with that. Now, I'm still very conscious 4 years on that I just don't want to flick something to someone about, can you do this for me? I always make sure with my team that, and again, through the constant one-on-ones and, through the work rhythm that we have, it's this is what needs to be done. Now, I'm going to give this to you because, and I always make it that it's part of their project plan, that this is going to develop you for X, Y, Z reason. It's not just a case of, can you do this for me? Thanks so much. It's a case of, well, I want you to do this because you haven't been exposed to this project before, or I want you to attend this meeting on my behalf for you to be exposed for your personal brand. And that's another big thing for me as well, is that I'm a huge advocate for my team, because I want to see them succeed, and I want them to move up the ranks, right? Because that's the whole point, right? You want to move up in your job and you want to get better at what you do. But for me, if I just got my team to do all the groundwork, well, that's boring. It's not going to benefit them in the long run. But for me as well, I want them to gain advocacy in the business, because they work in the grad space. Just because they're not the manager, we're still gaining advocacy for the program. So for me, it's about getting them out there as well to alleviate themselves, not just internally, but externally as well, because they're, personal brand, but also they're deepening their knowledge, they're gaining, confidence in their skills. And again, then we're going to be a stronger team together, rather than just me at the helm and everybody else in the background. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. And I think that's, be a privilege to work in your team with the transparency and the nurturing of their own personal development. I'm assuming they've got development plans as well. Just flipping it a little bit, the executive sponsor that you report into, how do you best communicate to that person, and maybe it's just unique to yourself and the relationship that you have, but advice that you can give to a practitioner that really wants to build that rapport and have a solid relationship so they can be a trusted partner?
Yeah, it's a really good one. And I think, again, it'll differ for everyone as to who their their sponsor will be. It might be their manager, it might be somebody in the business or whoever it is. But actually, I would encourage everybody to have multiple sponsors. Yes, it might be that your manager is your go-to, right? Because they can be your biggest advocate. But, for me over the years, it's also finding people for me in the business, in some of our grad areas, where we need that advocacy. We want more grads, and therefore I need someone in the business who's going to help me do that. So it's definitely about kind of picking your team and who you want to be in your corner. But in terms of how to communicate with them, and again, it will differ for everyone, going back to that, everybody communicates in a different way and everyone's got different communication styles. I've been fortunate to have a couple of managers over the years that I've been in this seat. And again, I can look at kind of the different styles and think, oh no, I had to do that for them and I had to do that for them. But I think it's early on, it's actually just asking them, how do you want me to, update you? Is it in our one-on-ones? Is it verbally? Do you want me to be sending you PowerPoint packs? Do you want me to be sending you X, Y, Z? Because it's then also, how are they going to share that? So with my current manager, he's a big believer in internal marketing. So, if we've won an award or if we've done, X, Y, Z, he will actively promote that internally. So for me and him at the moment, it's very much that I will summarize for him, our wins for the week or the recent campaign, for him to then, to be able to share that in a written format. However, the manager I had before was big on the stats, and I would have to be preparing, monthly Excels and 10 into PowerPoints. So my tech skills definitely uplifted then. But again, because he preferred to share things in sort of like that format. So again, I think it's just get comfortable with having to work in multiple formats, multiple channels, because ultimately it's going to to impact us in a positive way if we've got our advocates putting us into the spotlight, which is what we want, right? It's the end goal.
Yeah. And I guess how having your manager advocate for you, you would think is almost a given, right? But how do you tap
not always.
and this was going to lead into the question. How do you make sure that I guess one, that they are actually acting as your advocate, but in extension to that they're advocating the way that you need them to advocate, because sometimes that message that you want them to get across isn't then the message that potentially they go out there and promote. How do you make sure that you've got that alignment?
Yes. Yeah. And look, I think at the beginning for me, there was definitely probably some crossed wires when it came to, this is the information I want you to convey. And then when that was conveyed, it probably wasn't in the way that I would have done it. But again, I think going back to that is that maybe I just didn't have the confidence in myself to go back and question the way that it was going to be communicated, right? And actually, and then in some instances, and now, if there's a spot at the table for any opportunity in an internal meeting or an internal pack or anything where it's like, actually, let's get someone along to speak about the grad program, I will do it. As much as if it's a case of, but it's an exec meeting, or it's like, no, I'm the best advocate for my program. So yes, I could give someone a slide and all of these stats, but actually I want to be able to advocate for it for myself. And look, I've been very lucky in some instances over the last 4 years where I have been able to go and sit on, exec meetings or have a 5-minute slot ahead of HR forum to be able to, showcase the program. Yes, not everyone's going to get that opportunity, and I get that. And we won't all get the same level of advocacy as everybody else. So I think advice-wise, it's make sure that you communicate clearly with your sponsor, whether it be a one-up or whoever it is. This is what you need conveying. And to that point, it's like, we're just going to share some stats about how well the program went. That's great, but how does that feed into the organization's, again, wider purpose or strategy? Is there a focus on, I don't know, let's say, for example, gender parity in the organization, whatever it is? Great, there is for whatever financial year. Okay, well, actually, with the grad program, we've just hired X%, which makes our, female hires surpass males. Great. Well, there's a success story. Get that out there. Send that through the internal marketing channels. So again, I think it's about not just what we do and celebrating the small wins, which may be like huge to us, but in the grand scheme of things to the organization, they'd be like, Who cares?
Yep.
So I think it's a case of then really being strategic and thinking, okay, in our recent campaign, we did X, Y, Z. That actually feeds into talent acquisition strategy, or it's, feeding into the organization strategy, or this is a really good win in terms of a customer care experience, or whatever it is. If you've got something that aligns to the organization as a whole, like, people are going to want to hear about it. And, I think a lot of us organizations have internal marketing channels. Some of us have Slack, some of us have Teams, some of us have, whatever else. But I am the biggest, like, honestly, people must just get sick of my posts, because I am literally putting things in there. Hey guys, we started our mentoring program this year and we had, over 200 members. And hey guys, we did this campaign for our institutional bank last month and we received X amount of applications resulting in X hires. How exciting. Like, nobody probably reads it, but I'm like, if I'm not putting it out there, like, why would anybody else do that? So yes, you can rely on your advocates and your sponsors to do it, but if you have the means to do it yourself, why would you not? Because you are the biggest, you are your program. Ultimately, as a manager, you are the eyes and the ears of your program. You're the face, let's say. So if nobody knows who you are, I
think that's great advice. Know your brand and promote your brand within the business, but also take your opportunity. Don't rely on someone else to be your advocate. If you do get asked to share some information and it's a meeting, ask for a 5-minute slot and to be an advocate and own that that presentation. I love that advice. I can't believe how quickly time goes. I really don't.
It's wild.
It is
it's
wild.
Honestly wild.
Any last thoughts, Steven, or a final question for Natalie?
Too many to squeeze into the couple of minutes that we've got left. But maybe one really, really salient point, Nat, has been that imposter syndrome piece. Because for as long as I've known you, I would never have picked that was something that you struggled with. Even early doors, taking that first role. If you could impart knowledge to, maybe not necessarily people that are getting promoted, but they're, let's say the program's struggling, or they're going to a new business, or the business is pivoting, and you feel that, am I actually the right person to be doing this, to be leading this forward? What would be that one kernel bit of advice that you would give to, the listeners that we've got, or the people that are watching on the stream, to say, this is how I got through it. Take this advice, it might help.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, there's so many things. I think, again, going back to the point where I've said, back yourself 100%, because there's going to be times, whether it be at the beginning, even now 4 years in, sometimes I'm like, oh no, what? But I think, you have to be your biggest advocate. You have to believe in yourself. Everybody knows you can do it. It's actually sometimes just letting yourself know that you can do it, right? So it's just about sometimes having that sort of little inner talk to yourself to be like, you've got this. But I think also, in order to really cement yourself in, I've got this, again, going back to my point of, be the best that you can be in terms of your knowledge. So really make sure that you're externally connected. You know what's going on externally to bring that into your program. If you're really struggling with an element of your program, whether it be the brand, the marketing, the recruitment, a lot of us just be like, oh, there's something wrong with us. Like, it's us. But actually, if you go to your external networks, and you don't know everyone, right? With this grad is huge, right? You're never going to know everybody, but through some of the industry networks, through LinkedIn, through, other people at organizations, reach out to them on LinkedIn. Hey guys, just wondering, is it just us, or are you struggling with this? You know what I mean? It's like, just get the validation from others that, okay, well, maybe this is an industry problem. How are we going to go about solving it? Everybody's connected with unis, career services. Reach out to your contacts, because if you can be getting any external data or insights that's going to kind of validate what you're doing, good or bad, then that's going to help you feel a little bit more confident when it comes to tackling a problem, or even maximizing what you're doing. And then another thing I think, just to end on, is that internal piece as well. I don't feel that you're alone. And I think, again, a lot of us in grad do tend to feel like that sometimes, because we're independent from the rest of the organization. And sometimes it is just you as the manager or as a practitioner sort of running the space. But don't be afraid to connect internally to people who you need to be in your corner. Because ultimately, all organizations want to see us succeed, right? Like, because, and I think again, like just making sure that, you know, for organizations to know that Grad, it isn't just a service, it is a strategic function, and making sure that everybody knows that. So it's again, having the right people in your corner internally to be able to go to at times to be like, I really need help with this. Can you get me XYZ? If you build that trust over time, then ultimately all the pieces will connect, but it does take time. And I'll probably just end with that, is that, you know, I stepped in and I was like, right, I've got this. It's going to be, you know, couple of weeks and it'll be like I've never not done it. As I said before, it was a good 9 months before I was like, okay, I'm in there now, I think, and you know, we can carry on. So I think it's about just having that patience and the longevity to be like, okay, if something stuffs up or if something isn't too right at the beginning, don't just throw your hands up and be like, I can't do it. Like, it's again just about that longevity and having that long-term goal in mind. And persistence is key, I think.
Yeah. So back yourself. Know your stuff internally, know your stuff outside, but then patience. You know, it's okay. I mean, Grad's a long game, right? We recruit up to a year before they start. The program runs 12, 18, 24 months. You know, so that's like potentially 3 years of a recruitment and development cycle before you can really go, that Grad's gone through everything right now. So, you know, it is a long game.
I really like that you are an advocate for having someone to talk to, a mentor, and seeking information. And I'm sure you can be found on LinkedIn. If anyone who is, of course,
yeah, I think you can find that on LinkedIn.
You can, but you're really open with your time. And if someone did reach out with any further questions, I'm sure you'd be really happy to to provide any advice.
100%. You know, I think like, you know, people can probably look at my, you know, LinkedIn, or like you said, Steve, look at me and think, oh, she's got her stuff together. She doesn't need any help. But, you know, I think for anyone out there, you know, it might be that you are doing this, but behind the scenes, maybe things aren't so rosy, and that's okay. And I think, you know, in our industry, we should be all helping each other because we do the same thing, but we should be all helping each other. And I'm a big advocate of that. So yeah, always happy to speak to anyone who needs.
Well, we really appreciate you speaking to us and sharing your story and such a topical thing within the grad space, having a seat at the table and how you got there. So, Natalie, thank you for joining us. Greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you so much.